Hi guys. So today I had a question on Michelle Manna's channel that I decided to answer on my own channel here, and this is the question. And I just want you to keep in mind it was a very good question, and I love questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them as honestly and openly as possible. To do this question, I had collabed with my brother so we could answer together on how things were back then. So here we go. Hi guys! So today I'd like to talk about a question I had on one of Michelle Manna's videos. And I actually have my brother here to help me explain that.
Hello.
The question was, I'd be interested to know if the childhood abuse took place within the core family or not. If yes, could you talk with your family about this part of your trauma history? And then she also continues on, your mother stated she was the one who disciplined you the most. What did she mean by that? Beating, etc. And how do you end up getting caught in a cult? Only as far as you're comfortable to share this information, for sure. Was it local church or religious school you went to? My mother's side, not so much. My mother finally come out and talked about her SA abuse. So when my mother had talked about her abuse, she had explained that, between her and her sister, that this incident took place on a school bus. And back then they didn't have law enforcement to get involved. It was basically families take care of family stuff. So according to what I know of,
I've heard the story.
yeah, and basically so our grandfather just basically went over to, of what I know of, this other kid's house, and they did discipline. That was how it was done, and the abuse stopped with my mom. So now, like my dad's side, that was a different story. Basically that abuse went back 3 generations, and I want to say the SA abuse and physical abuse aspect was there. Their family was a little more poorer, struggles, they had a lot more kids. There's actually 11 kids in that family. So for us as siblings, I basically was the reason I wanted this stuff to stop, because it was going from generation to generation. Me and my brother, we just kind of stuck together and decided this was not something we wanted to deal with. And I think one of the things that he talks about, but not very often, is his own abuse. The reason he doesn't have DID is because his abuse was brief. So his abuse took place...
I was so young, I barely remember it. I was probably maybe 3 or 4, 5 years old at the time. I barely remember it. And it wasn't a severe abuse like you were, because my abuser had some form of mental retardation. So he didn't know what he was doing either. He was kind of a kid in his own brain. So brief that I barely remember it.
Yeah, and I remember Dad talking about it. He had stated something about he had a meeting. Him and Mom had a meeting with Grandpa and Grandma. The problem is he wasn't the only one doing it. I think he was just mimicking whatever the other brothers and sisters were doing at the time. So, but as far as like more family, yes, our sister was abused too. She claimed till she was 16 years old, but we don't know the whole story. We don't talk to her because, as far as my story, she's part of that story, so we don't really get into detail too much about that, to respect a little bit, of the family. So the next question was, your mother stated she was one who disciplined you the most. What did she mean by that? Beatings, etc. So back then our parents were... I'll let you have this one.
I think I got the best way to explain it. Back then, you could use the generation thing. Our parents were baby boomers. Me and my sister, well, you're kind of closer to the millennial, but we're more or less...
By 1 year.
Yeah, more or less Gen X. X. Back in those days, it was just a different society back in those days. Discipline meant you got spanked. Kids got spanked in those days. Open hand or a stick or a belt, you got your butt whooped a little bit, That was just the way our parents did discipline in those days. It was a different time.
And I mean, we, as far as like understanding it, was it wrong? And does my mother know that she maybe went too far sometimes, or my father went too far sometimes? Yeah.
I remember getting my butt spanked pretty good by
Me too.
my old man.
But that was how it was back then. So it's like people say, well, do we hate our mother? No. We will love our mother. Do we love how she disciplined us? No. And there are things that we talk about that shouldn't have happened, and we're pretty open with our mother about that, and she's older and she's set in her ways, so we can't change her. We can't make her who she isn't. The fact that she's changed in some ways to understand the disorder more, and me and my brother openly talk about things, I think that's probably what helps the most.
I think what would help people understand things the best is like the millennials and the new generation, this Gen Z. You guys have like unlimited information. You have the internet, Google, Wikipedia. You got to understand, in our time, there was no internet. There was no smartphones. We had the old rotary landline phone where you had to
dial it. And we had to have permission to use it. We weren't allowed to touch it unless. And so when we got older, would we sneak off to use it? I did.
It was just such a different. So this instant information was not available. If we wanted to know something, we had to look in the old expired from the 1960s, encyclopedias that were out of date, or go to the school library. There was no internet. The internet really didn't. Yeah. And we lived and we lived out in the country, so by that things were even more far behind the times.
Parents were farmers. They were so busy.
Old school baby boomers.
Yeah, old school baby boomers.
I'll give you something to cry about. That kind of thing. Yeah.
So it's like we grew up with a very do-it-yourself kind of manner. And I had stated that in previous videos. Basically, free-range children. We learned as we seen. My brother can tell you there were times he'd go to the neighbors to work at 9 years old. He was baling hay already at 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, I was driving tractor already when I was 10. It was a short childhood. You became an adult very quickly.
Yes. By the time we were 8 years old, our childhood was the fun games were done.
You were milking cows, and you had chores that had to be done.
But because of that, I was put in situations I shouldn't have been. Here we go. How did you end up getting caught in the cult, only as far as you're comfortable with to share? So the cult thing, and my brother can explain that too, and I can remember having a fight with my father and me standing on the steps in our old house, and we got in a fight. And I remember him getting so mad, he was like this with his fists, and I got upset, and I said, "You want to hit me? Hit me." I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And he goes, "There's the door." And I chose the door. I grabbed my bag, packed everything I had, and I left. And that's when I had stayed with the neighbors up the road. And my brother, of course, he was more set in. He couldn't understand the issue. We even fought. He didn't know what was wrong with me.
I didn't fully understand what was going on at the time.
Sometimes I'd be real sweet, and the next minute I thought they were mood swings, and it wasn't. It was the DID, because there's pieces of my life today I couldn't remember.
I knew something was going on, but again, for the time, I didn't have access to information, so I didn't know what to do about it. Who do you call? What do you do? You didn't have this.
Yep, you didn't have 1-800 lines.
You didn't have like the hotline. Well, maybe you did, but we weren't aware of it, where you could call and talk to people.
Well, it was the same with the schools. The schools didn't educate us on abuse. We had health ed, but that wasn't much. Basically, I moved in with the neighbors off and on, slowly I started living over there. And from there, she started this. There was I call it an old Roman Catholic cult because that's what it was. They were based on the Old Testament times. So it was, how do I put it? And he had dropped me off at the place sometimes, because I needed to be there for Bible study. And was it a school? No. You had stated, was it a church? Was it a local church? No. It was a secret-based cult based out of family and friends.
But they made it look like a church, kind of.
Yeah.
They
And
tried
this
to make
nun
it
out
out
of
to be-
this nun out of Iowa, because the year 2000 was coming, she was talking of end times and Mark of the Beast and all this. How we had to wear dresses past our knees, we had to wear our scapulas, our necklaces, all that. And my brother has met this nun.
Yeah.
He did. You can explain what happened.
Well,
at the house.
it didn't seem like it was super out of the ordinary because we had the old school Amish living by us, and they lived kind of that way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wasn't real religious myself, but I respected other people's religious belief, especially with the Amish. To get along with the Amish, you had to respect their beliefs. So I didn't think nothing of it either. I just thought, well, maybe this religious thing would be a good thing for her. Maybe she'll,
They didn't know. Had
But
no
it was just
idea.
the opposite.
They had no idea. But it was funny because even like the day that the nun and my neighbor lady come to our family farm, the nun had paperwork. She wanted my dad to sign me off and give her custody of me, and I was
Red flag,
16,
red
17
flag.
years old. Yeah, red flag. My mom was talked into it. My dad, on the other hand, he's like, no.
No,
He wouldn't even talk to her.
Me too. I'm like, no.
But see, my mom grew up a Lutheran, so she was a little bit religious herself, and she had thought the same thing. Well, maybe this nun can straighten her out. And the reason they talked like that was because I had these moods, and and there's prior videos talking about the abuse that I had endured over at that place. As far as like a school, I would say there was probably about between 40 to, I don't know. And it was weird because the neighbor lady's family was involved. There were some of the friends involved. There were children, quite a few children there. Some of them I've ran into, and they talk about what they can remember. And basically, if you were 12 and up, if you didn't listen, you were disciplined. You could be locked in a bedroom, or you could be. For me, it was because she was an old midwife. She had this midazolam, which I got scars on my hips from calf needles being shoved into my hip to knock me out, to control me. And he doesn't, that's the thing. It was kept so private.
Yeah, I mean, I just dropped you off, and then I went.
But he
to work.
noticed the changes.
Yeah,
He noticed I'd be really moody on Friday, and something wasn't right, and all of a sudden I'd come back and I'd be this real quiet, perfect, disciplined child.
And then you say, well, how did that nun get access to those drugs? Well,
She was a midwife.
Well, and that farmers, we had access to drugs for the cows.
Cows.
Yeah, so and there weren't the regulations weren't as strict back then either.
Things were easier to access. I mean, even like some people, I can remember farmers actually taking antibiotics that were meant for animals, to get through some. Our childhood, I got ringworm as a kid, and I think my brother has too. And our dad, blue coat. We went to school with blue coat.
It works though.
All over us,
works.
big blue spots.
But it does get rid of it.
And you're not
but it
supposed
says
to
right
use
on
it
the
on
can
humans.
for animal use only.
Yeah. So there was times, that these things, I mean, how do I put this? Our parents should have known better. I'll put it that way. There were times in our lives we lost fingers. Him cutting mine off. He actually had his thumb cut off in the poop spreader. So we've each lost a finger. The only one that hasn't is our sister, I don't think. But and like another question you asked, why wasn't our mother involved? Why did she do something? Well, my mother had restrictions. She's kind of more or less a victim, same as us.
I don't think she knew what to do about it.
No. Well, and here's the thing. Our mother doesn't know society. She doesn't leave the home.
She was a country girl.
She don't even drive.
No.
She actually, when she wanted to go out, she took the horse.
And she still doesn't like to go to town.
No, she hates going to town.
That's why she still lives with me. I do the grocery
We
shopping.
take care of her.
Yeah.
We do what we can. And he takes care of her most of the time.
She likes being in the woods hunting and fishing. She
Yeah.
hates town. She hates socializing. She kind of keeps to herself.
So we'll touch a subject on like therapy wise. I think that's something you might be interested in as far as why do I have such intense therapy and why doesn't he? And again, it goes back to the point where I think my brother does have, as my therapist has stated, some form of post-traumatic stress disorder from incidences growing up, dangers.
Well, your
that.
therapist explained it best to me. And I have a friend who's a volunteer firefighter, and he's seen dead bodies and rescued people. And I've asked him, I says, doesn't that bother you? And he says, after a while you kind of get like an immunity to it, or you're so used to seeing it that it just doesn't bother you anymore. And I've been through a lot of stuff, but it just doesn't affect me. You know, what's traumatizing to one person might not bother another person. It depends on your perspective on things.
I mean, the way we grew up, we've seen death. We've seen death every day since we were born. We've seen calves die. We've seen, and I think the hardest part's my brother's even seen an Amish girl dead. You know, and he did. We have this mood to where when something bad happens, our instincts can kick in.
Emergency response, kind of like the first responders. You just got to take care of this.
Like for him, he's never been tested. I have. My survival skills are about 139 point something, very high, which shocked the doctors that did the testing. Yet my learning skills are really low, like spelling and science and all that, like second grade. But like him, it's the same thing. We excel in certain things to survive. So for him, he's able to. We both, if per se the world went chaotic, could we live off the land? We both couldn't easily. We know how. We were taught that as children. You know?
Sometimes you had to.
I can remember my mother doing maple syrup in the dark in the back of the 40, and I'm 6 years old, and she's like, I gotta walk home to do this or whatever, and she left me in the woods. And she didn't come back, and so I was like, I had to walk home, 6 years old in the dark on 40. Scariest experience ever as a child.
You know, that didn't bother me. I like being in the woods. I'd sit back there by the fire. It depends how
your brain processes it.
I used to sit by the fire where the sap was boiling. You throw hot dogs and boil your
I remember
eggs.
Doing that. That was a good part.
Yeah, I love sitting back in the woods all by myself. I loved it. It was quiet. Yeah. Back in those days, there was, but not in our area. We never even heard of a therapist or stuff like that. That wasn't a thing in those days.
We've heard of asylums, you know, and things like that.
Yeah, from movies and stuff. Well, that's where they send the crazy people.
Yeah. So we were taught to hide it. Any kind of emotions, it's like my mother does not cry. And to get her to cry takes a lot, you know. Now, if we're crying, babies.
You give me grief about it too, because I hardly ever cry.
Yeah, I cry more now. I cry pretty easily. But I've had years and years of therapy to help me learn to process emotions. For him, he's different. He doesn't want to cry, nor does he wish to cry.
Crying doesn't solve the issue.
Yeah, see, that's how he
But that's
feels.
how it's brought up.
Yeah. So we accept that. He's going to be different. He's going to view things differently. Is it wrong how he views things? Sometimes. But that's how he feels about it, and that's how he deals with it. You know, we can't change who we are, and we can't change how we are, and everybody's aspect on things is going to be different. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you for the question, and you're more than welcome to ask any other questions you have, and I'll try to answer them, or we'll try to answer them as best as we can. So I guess that's it, right?
I guess.
Right?
Sure.
So I hope you found that useful, and like I said, you're more than welcome to ask any more questions that you have. And I mean, keep in mind, my memory is not perfect, so there are things that can be difficult for me to answer, but because of therapy, because of the work, I am able to start answering questions, start remembering. I would say the last 2 years have been the hardest to process through things. And I still have dissociative identity disorder. I still have alters that are not healed yet. But as time goes on and they give me those memories back, I am able to process through them, cry through them, get angry with them, And the neat thing is, my brother, who was in that video, he's a piece of me. He's pieces of my memory that I don't have. So when I get stuck and I have a problem, I'll talk to him and we'll take him to therapy with us, and he'll explain, okay, I remember this, this is how that happened, and then it'll register my brain to connect. Or he'll work with my alters. He's also been in therapy with Alter 6, at times, and Squeezy and all them, and he helps them to remember, and he works with me. It's difficult for him. For him, showing emotions is so difficult, but each time we work together and we figure things out, we get a step further, and I get better, and that's my goal. I do not want to be stuck with dissociative identity disorder. And it's like I stated, the complex PTSD part of it will never go away. I'll still have to process through memories, but to be able to lose that amnesic barrier has been priceless. The pain and the suffering I went through was horrible, but in the end, if I can process through it, I get one step further to getting better, and that's the goal. So you're more welcome to use this in your therapy or any other educational purposes, and that'd be about it today, guys. Love yous. Bye.